Selectmen meeting for April 1st to order at 6 p.m. and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was just going to mention that Dawn Alcombright might be, Dancing Dawn, might be a couple minutes late.
You might have to explain why you're calling him Dancing
Do I have to
Dawn.
explain? Oh, I guess I probably do.
You probably do.
What was the event? Was it the, was it a? Harlem Wizards. Okay, that's what I thought. So it looked like you. No, it. Dawn, you did a great job in the dance-off.
So the schools host an event every year, and Dawn was selected to dance with some of the basketball players. So it's a worthwhile video for anyone who didn't get a chance to see it.
Hence the nickname, the Dancing Dawn. So, anyways, Tyler is not going to be here tonight, so it's just the four of us. Before we get started, I'm going to go through the announcements. This meeting is being recorded by the local scene. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify the chair at this time. And seeing nobody. Financial assistance applications are available on the town's website or by calling the Selectmen's office. For anyone interested in volunteering, there are several vacancies on various committees and boards. To see a complete list of the openings, please visit our website at kingstonma.gov. Also, check out the website for additional events or notices. And we do have our town meeting coming up on April 26th and the town election on May 17th. Also, Missy, did you want to make an announcement about?
Gray's Beach stickers went on sale. They can be found at the recreation website. Out-of-town stickers are sold out already.
All right. Any other announcements or comments from the other?
How long did it take to sell the out-of-town stickers?
15 minutes.
Wow.
Okay.
All right. Any other announcements from you guys?
Sounds like an opportunity for a fee increase, but
Right.
maybe a future year.
All right. Up next is open forum. If there's anybody here who wanted to address the board or anybody online. There isn't anybody online, is there? Okay. All right, we're going to move right on to our appointments. The first one is a presentation from the Sewer Commission on the FY26 warrant article funding request. So if you guys, Elaine, if you want to take it away.
Oh, okay. Okay. I want to start off with Elaine Fury, Sewer Commissioner Chair. I want to start off with a letter from 1988 from a resident in Rocky Nook. And it was addressed to the Selectmen. It states, "We have raw sewage running down the sides of a majority of our streets. Stench from sewage water is so bad one does not wish to go out of the house. When this situation exists, children come out of their homes to board buses for school. They stand in contaminated water. Their shoes get soaking wet." Now, this is a whole long letter, but that's the gist of it. And boy, have we come a long way since then. In the late 1990s, the town embraced the role of environmental steward of our local waterways with the introduction of the municipal sewer system. With the introduction of the sewer system, our local waterways, including Kingston Bay and the Jones River, are being utilized to its full extent with recreational activities and commercial shell fishing. Gray's Beach now hosts movie nights, a waterfront festival, and farmers market. The general fund has enjoyed an increased tax base with the increase in property values, and last but not least, our drinking water has been protected. Attached to your handout is a report that was done in 1998. It's a final facilities plan. On the second page of it is a letter from the Commonwealth of Mass. It's a certificate of the Secretary of the Environmental Affairs of the environmental notification form. So, and that basically states the different phases that were approved back in 1998. The certificate states the municipal sewer system was outlined as 2 phases. Phase 1 was the build-out of the original 2 tanks. Phase 2 was the most recent plant expansion to 4 tanks and includes an additional disposal site. The document goes on to say that Davis property was suitable as the additional disposal site, which is the leaching field project that was just built. In 1997, the town committed to paying 1/3 of the cost of the adopted plan, which included Phase 1 and Phase 2 as described above. The town is currently paying 1/3 of the cost of Phase 1, which are the 2 original tanks. The town is not paying 1/3 of the cost of the planned Phase 2 as described in the notification from 1997. At this time, we are asking for the town to pay 1/3 of the cost of the leaching field project as it was part of the adopted plan from 1997. The estimated final cost of the leaching field project is $8,200,000, including interest. These are just estimates. The state revolving fund loan has a term of 20 years with a yearly debt payment of approximately $413 million. The town's 1/3 share of the project would be estimated at $2,756,000, and the average yearly debt payment of $137,820. Estimated yearly cost per 5,000 parcels is $28 per parcel. Over a 20-year period, that would be $551 per parcel per town property. If the sewer customers paid 2/3 of the project cost, it would be $5,500,000, with an average yearly debt payment of $275,000. An estimated yearly cost per equivalent residential unit, which is right now we have an estimate of $2,200, is $125. Plus, that same property owner would incur the $28 mentioned as just being a taxpayer for the 1/3. So the yearly cost would be $153. Over 20 years, the sewer customer would be paying $3,060. If the town does not support the 1/3 payment of the leaching fields, that $153 per year for a sewer customer would go up to $188 per sewer customer. So we're requesting the town continue their support of paying 1/3 of the adopted plan from 1997. And back then, part of the conversation was town-owned buildings do not pay a betterment. Town-owned buildings do pay a user fee based on water consumption. They do not pay a betterment, nor do state properties. So that was part of discussion at that time, that in lieu of paying a betterment, that they would help support the project 1/3. So that's what our article is for town meeting floor, asking for the support for that debt. Over 20 years, and that's another conversation on how do we secure, if it's successful at town meeting, how do we secure that payment over 20 years? What's the mechanism for the commitment for the town for 20 years? Because once we set up a debt schedule, it can't be year to year. We need to know that the town is actually committed for 20 years for a payment. And as I said, it's on average of $137,000.
Before I open up to questions from the board, just a reminder, we don't need to vote on this tonight. And it doesn't even, it's on the warrant. What we will be doing before it goes to town meeting is voting our support or not, and then speaking for or against it at the town meeting. So we don't really have to do anything tonight, but if we have questions, they're here now to answer if anybody has any questions. And the only comment I would have is the same that I had in the beginning. I mean, I know there's been some confusion, and we have a lot of folks when this project was brought up where it was stated multiple times that there would not be a cost to non-users moving forward with the project. But I know that that was based on certain projects moving forward that were going to pay for it, which ended up not happening. So
Could I just correct that?
Yep,
That statement
please do.
was for Phase 2, for the additional 2 tanks.
Okay,
That was specifically said that project would not be paid for by anyone but those interested in capacity. This is a completely different project outside of that. I know there's been confusion that,
okay.
you know, that my word wasn't honored. I, would like to correct that and clarify it. That statement was specific to the plant expansion for 2 tanks.
Yep,
Had nothing to do with the leaching field project, which actually took us 2 or 3 attempts to even get it approved at town meeting. So that wasn't even part of the conversation for the plant expansion.
okay, thank you for that clarification, because I misunderstood. I'm sure there's others who are going to,
And I'm glad you asked it, because I'm
Right.
sure there is. That's why I would thank you for
Right.
allowing me to clarify it.
right? And the point is, whether the town moves forward, I mean, we have a short-term problem, we have a long-term problem. Obviously, what the sewer commissioners want to do is have the town not just handle it for this coming year, but 20 years, so that 20-year commitment. But I didn't go through all the wording. The way it's worded on town warrant, is it just for this coming year? Or does it, so it doesn't put us on, that vote at town meeting isn't going to put us on the hook for 20 years. We're going to have to do something else. Is that, that's what you're saying?
Apparently, we submitted it for, the language we submitted was different, and apparently it's been vetted by legal counsel. And this, I'm guessing this is the approved language from legal counsel.
Okay,
Which is why I've asked what the mechanism would be that would commit the town for 20 years like it had in the past.
rather than voting every year.
Because what we have to do is set up, we have to assess special assessments to sewer customers.
Right, that makes sense.
I don't know if it's a, I don't know what the legal mechanism would be, because we've done it in the past.
Yeah, so I don't have the answer for you tonight either. Excuse me, my conversation with Attorney Tallerman was that you can't bind future town meetings, whether or not there's some sort of specific language, almost like a debt article, so to speak, where you could potentially bind the general fund for 20 years, 30 years, whatever the length of the note is. We can certainly check that out with Attorney Tallerman, but the way the language is written today, or in the warrant now, is just for fiscal '26. It would not bind any future town meetings. And I have not asked. All I can tell you is Jay has said you can't bind future town meetings. But I can certainly check and see if there's some sort of language and share it with the sewer commissioners. I'll call them tomorrow and ask them specifically, how do we go about doing that, if it's even legal to do that, and provide the wording to allow it to happen.
It's been going on for 25 years on a 30-year
It has.
debt,
and
so I'm guessing there is a mechanism to do it.
So I'm suggesting, so in my conversation with Jay, and I wasn't here 25 years ago, so I
Nor was I.
can't speak specifically to it. The impression I've been left with, strong impression I've been left with, is the agreement that was made 25 years ago, where it said initially the sewer commissioners would set the percentage of debt that was going to be shared by the general fund, and later modify a little bit, did not bind future town meetings. It's been going on because I just think it's been an accepted practice. I can't sit here tonight and say specifically that the language that was approved 25 years ago was binding for 30 years.
Yeah, and I equate it to Silver Lake High School.
Sure.
You know, you got 3 towns paying a debt, sharing debt, so to me, it's sharing debt.
Yep.
And whatever that mechanism is, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Jay tomorrow, and as soon as I get, if there is an ability to do it, I'll try to get that language, and have that language ready for next Tuesday night for the board to decide if they want to go for 1 year, for more than 1 year, or not at all.
And, and again, just from a planning perspective and a financial perspective, if we go year to year, then it doesn't give us a fixed amount
I agree.
that we're going to be charging sewer customers unless the town wants to do a reallocation on tax bills every single year. So,
Sorry, I just want to make sure this is the first time I'm seeing this,
yeah,
so
it is.
just taking it in.
Yeah?
You mentioned that this document from 1997 talks about a Phase 1 and a Phase 2. I see that highlighted. And can we get this added to the packet after? Okay. Just for the public's benefit. And you had mentioned that the intent was for the town to cover 1/3 of the cost. I remember that discussion from prior meetings. We talked about that.
Yeah.
But you said that that was not the intention for the two tanks, but it was the intention for the leaching field?
The intention was for all the projects, all future capital projects with sewer projects in town to be covered 1/3, 2/3.
Interesting. Okay.
At the time, the planned expansion, there was no support for the town paying anything for the plant expansion. Brian's knowledge and experience, because he was here 25 years ago, as well as Bill Watson was on the advisory committee back in that time. They've shared with me since then, this commitment was for everything, and Brian can certainly elaborate more on that. Wasn't here 25 years ago, so I wasn't aware of that nuance that both of them were. So
Okay.
that's why we went forward. We needed to have the plan expansion for the growth that we were being requested for in town, as well as revenue, and that was the approach we took to be able to do what needed to be done at the time. But Brian is certainly a better speaker on that than I am.
Okay. I did reach out to, when we talked about this, I don't know, in the fall, I guess, I reached out to former Selectman Dick Arruda, who was here at the time. So I was asking him about this, and he had mentioned to me that he believed it was Mark Beaton that had brought that 1/3, but it was a 1/3 percentage, and there was some concern about the way that the betterment was going to be calculated, and that it was going to be done on frontage. So there was a concern that it couldn't. He didn't like how they were initially calculating the betterments off of the frontage. So obviously I wasn't there at that meeting, so I can't speak to that, and we don't have recordings, so we can't dig into that other than the minutes. I guess we could ask Mark, because I guess he was the one who brought it up.
Well, it would probably help. We don't do it by frontage, but
I think that was the
Brian
initial
here.
proposal, and he didn't like that, but again, I wasn't here, I'm just telling you what
Yeah,
they said to me.
and I wasn't
don't-
either, so that's if Brian wants to step up.
Okay, sure. While you're coming up, the other question I was just going to ask was, the leaching field piece of the sewer expansion was presented twice. Either time was this 1/3 town responsibility brought up?
No, because I wasn't aware at that time, again.
That's fair.
Brian's the-
Understood, thank you.
Hi, Brian Donahoe, Sewer Commission. To the point of the 1/3, as we said, the town, through a lot of process, the facility planning, public meetings and all that, and then basically put into a final form in the final environmental documents and the agreement that went forward, as we talked about. That 1/3, 2/3, what Mark Beaton actually made a motion at the same time, which was to reverse it. So the 2/3 will be paid for by the town, 1/3 by the users. That was defeated like 9,000 to 1.
I don't think that many people came to town meeting.
I actually have all those minutes here, too.
Okay.
And then to your point about the frontage, that was discussed, and it was unfair. We went through that in depth, and we came up with and voted to have a uniform method, which basically uses Title V, 110 gallons per bedroom, and that's how we've been doing it ever since. So we have what's called an ERU, Equivalent Residential Unit, and everything we do from there on in terms of betterments and is associated with that.
Okay.
So that was cleared up back then, but there was a lot of discussion. And then a final point that just going to the two tanks, and I look at it as the second phase. It was the two tanks and all the equipment that went with it. We're part of that 2/3, 1/3. It was not part of this process, and the Sewer Commission has been focusing on paying that with actual betterment fees. So we are not bringing that to you today. So that's a big number. That's a $28 million number. This is something that no one has paid for. The $7 million, $8 million we're talking about, which started as $11 million, by the way, when it was passed by town meeting, we brought it down with some good engineering review. But that was never part of any request, and the town never paid for it before or after. The leaching fields that we don't want to be using were temporary, as I think I've mentioned several times. And now we have the permanent one, which, again, was embodied in this document you're reading there. So we're only going in for that one thing, and the sewer commission is endeavoring to pay for everything through betterments. But that opens the segue to the really important question, which is the only way we can pay for this betterment capital cost that remains is to get people to hook up and to get people to be part of the system. And I have a plan over here, if you'd like to see it, which we just had done since the last meeting. I've been working on this, trying to get my sewer committee agenda going together, but we've spent literally 3 to 4 weeks a month on this subject. But it shows you the areas that are still open to be sewered. It's quite a big area. It's to finish protecting the water supply of this town. It's to finish protecting some of Gray's Beach areas that we've started having contamination this last year for the first time. So we're not done. But this gets to the water moratorium question, which we've been endeavoring to, and I know you have. We have to solve that problem, and the sewer commission is going to approach the water department and ask for a discussion on opening up at least those bodies, those parcels, I should say, that are on the sewer that have been put in to solve a huge environmental problem, to open up the water so we can hook them up and get the tax revenue that we all need. Because we've been held in abeyance for now 2.5 years, 2 years, and we can't go on. When I heard this 7-year thing, it ain't gonna happen. We need the revenue, we have to be open for business, we had to get going, and we're gonna work with you in the water department to get that done, sooner than later. I'll answer any other questions.
Sets how much water we can pull, though, right?
Yeah, ultimately DEP sets, so we would have to, and I didn't hear the whole speech, so I apologize, but we have the opportunity, if everybody's on board, to ask for DEP to consider a waiver or an additional amount that can be withdrawn from our wells. The concern DEP has shared with me months ago was that the water loss that we had in the last water loss report was, at 22% when the threshold is 10. So I've been assured by the water department that they've addressed the water loss issue, and they do that in a report once a year that goes, either gets submitted in April to DEP or the report is completed in April. I'm not quite sure, Brian, on which date that is, but so I'm hoping at some point in the near future, the water department can demonstrate to Mass DEP that they've addressed the water loss issue to a point that's satisfactory enough for them to consider expanding the amount of water we're withdrawing from the ground through our well system.
Thanks for that. That's part of the story. I'm getting more directly involved with that point at this juncture. We want to work cooperatively with the water department on this, but there are ways to solve this problem, multiple ways. And Keith mentioned one that he had a conversation with DEP. I mean, at the worst case, if there's a shortage of water from a DEP regulatory point of view, I would go as far as to suggest, and I haven't mentioned this to anybody, basically entering an administrative consent order without a penalty, where we get the opportunity from DEP to overuse our wells for a short period of time with conditions that we don't, blow this out of the water. But they know we're putting a new well in. They know we're doing what we should be doing. Hopefully the leak issue's been resolved. I don't have that definitely. And if there is a leak problem, we should be fixing it. But we got to find a way to, in the next few months, get the spigot open so we can go out to, we're open for business. We want to expand this area that we have. Mostly it's commercial. It's all along Route 3A. That's where your revenue is going to come from. Our revenue is going to come from.
So unless I misheard, when the water commissioners spoke to us a couple weeks ago, they said that DEP won't open it.
They said that they
Or
asked
more than
for a
likely
waiver,
won't.
and they said no.
Yeah.
But maybe that's changed.
The other thing is, I may have misheard, but when they talked to us before, I thought they said that that the leak percentage wasn't accurate.
It was
Yes.
They said it was a miscalculation.
But
So it
but
could
from
be
that
bad.
meeting, I think it was, you were out of town.
Yes.
But from that meeting, they basically said, we need a new well before we can get more water. Which,
I think to that point, now that we have the well, from a town meeting point of view and an appropriation point of view, I think there's room right there to say, okay, the town's doing its job, spending a lot of money, we know there's water there, we know there's enough for what we need. We also have wells that we don't use for various reasons, but that's a backup if it's an emergency, for fire protection, for example, whatever. There's a lot of ways to technically, administratively, regulatorily solve this problem sooner than later. And I think that's where we should be focusing our attention. But it's hurting us big time, it's hurting us customers,
Right.
and we gotta resolve it, and that's where we're going.
I agree.
Any other questions?
Thank you for all the work you're doing on this.
Thanks. I get my committee going sooner or later. They all want to be on the committee. They call me all the time.
All right. Any other questions for the sewer commissioners? All right. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming tonight. Appreciate it. All right, before we jump into the capital plan, because I don't see Heath here anyways, why don't we jump ahead to the warrant review? But there's an article, we get the folks here from Kingston Collection Online, and I just think it would be good to jump to Article 26, the article where we're authorizing the selectmen to accept or dispose of property. And Val is here, I think, to explain. It's on page 2 of your warrant.
And just for clarity's sake, the numbers may change if we take any of these off, so the art, we should say, is it?
To authorize the selectmen to
So I
accept or
have
dispose of property.
27 on the one that's in front of me, but
geez.
authorize selectmen to accept or dispose of property, is that what you're
Yeah.
looking at? Okay.
That's the one, thank you. Val?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Valerie Massard, Town Planner, working with Second Horizon Capital, who's here tonight. They're here to answer any questions you might have. But one of the things that we're working on as a community is the redevelopment and successful reemergence of our Kingston collection. And Second Horizon Capital has invested in purchase of the mall and now the purchase of the Macy's building, and has been actively working for 2 to 3 years now on plans to redevelop this area. One of the things that they've been able to come up with is, in order to generate traffic and get people on the ground at the mall, is a gas station. And so, importantly, there's a limited amount of space because of the water protection overlay district that's there. And we've discovered in working together that there's some property that the fire station, and Chief is here if you have any questions, isn't using at the Smiths Lane Fire Station and doesn't need. And it would opportune the town in order to work with Second Horizon Capital to give up a portion of that fire station in order to, and of course through whatever arrangements this board makes. And that's what the article talks about, is the possibility of the disposition of some, what would be deemed surplus land by you at a future time, a portion of the fire station, in order to allow them to have enough frontage and area to put that gas station there. We think it's a great idea for the town in terms of revenue generation and future redevelopment of the mall, and we strongly support it.
All right, and just to be clear, we would be swapping, we would be giving land?
No, we're not swapping.
Okay,
That's not the right word to use.
okay,
We're looking at a disposition of the land that the fire department has,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're also looking at some land that's adjacent that is nearby that might be something that we'd be able to take a look at as well, in terms of acquiring land, which might also provide us an opportunity for an additional commercial lot
right.
in the community, which, again, would help us with redevelopment in that area.
Thank you. Yeah, the handout I have is kind of faint, but so on this one, I see the land for the fire station that juts out. Do you have the other parcel of land on this map?
It's there right next to it with the crosshatch.
Oh, okay, got it.
think the
Chair,
confusion
if
is
I
says
could,
it's
just to-
called land swap at the bottom of the
I know.
map, so I think that's why
Well,
there's some
the-
confusion.
The term swap isn't really appropriate.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I apologize, just to try to help everybody out. This property that I'm circling in red, or trying to circle desperately in red, I can't draw a stick figure, is the property that's currently owned now by the mall. The property here,
I
Oh.
think,
They're
the-
trying to say
They're
something.
speaking, but we can't
yeah,
hear
the
them.
guys online
Oh, I'm
are
sorry.
trying to speak, but the volume's not up very high. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the area in red is owned by the fire station, or it's part of the fire station.
Lot, and the area in purple is owned by, as part of the mall ownership, and that's the proposal that we work with Atlantic Engineers here to match sizes.
Yep, but the word swap is not appropriate.
Yeah.
But we
Correct.
are looking at the value of that property.
Right.
As something that we might acquire on a separate disposition of this town and this board.
So they're not both under this warrant? It's only.
They are both on the article to be
Okay.
considered separately and to not be related as a swap.
Okay.
I see.
the benefit, if I could, Val, the benefit to the town in obtaining the parcel from the mall, and again, the fire chief can explain this, or get into this much deeper than I can, but there is a benefit to the fire department. It's a more usable piece of property.
If I may, what we're talking about here is the possibility of the special permit that would come in for the gas station through the planning board, which is the zoning article that we have for the mixed-use redevelopment overlay district. We're looking to add all or portion of the fire station into the mixed-use redevelopment overlay district. With it's already an allowed use there. However, that would be a special permit through the ZBA. Because the planning board is the governing kind of permitting agency for them all, it's in the best interest of the community if we keep it in the mixed-use redevelopment overlay district. So that's the intent of that. The same exact conditions would apply as would if it were under the ZBA in terms of the conditions and special permit. What we've talked to with the Second Horizon Capital as part of the negotiations here is that the town expects that we would work with them on signal timing, on repaving, and possibly reallocating the way that the paved areas work within the fire department to make sure that there are no conflicts with traffic, there are no problems with traffic circulation, and that we may have some additional parking. The land behind the fire station, while we're considering it, isn't necessarily something that the fire department needs or wants to use. So that's why we want to keep these separate.
When you said about the signal, are you talking about just the fire station or the signal on William Gould?
We're primarily concerned with the fire station.
Okay.
However, and I'll point out, I'm going to walk over there, even though the people at home might not be able to see me. Here, driving this way. All of us are familiar as residents, if you're driving on Kingston Collection Way, away from Plymouth and towards the highway, there's a place where you're coming around the bend on your way to the signals that I'm talking about, and you can't see them. There's a blind hill that keeps you from seeing them. And so part of those negotiations do include the taking back of that hill to improve sight lines. So it's a safety consideration that the town gets as a win-win as well. And so there's a lot of pros to this conversation that would be part of those special permit conditions that we've already talked about with Second Horizon Capital.
And I love the idea of another gas station closer to the transfer station, and rather than having to drive into Plymouth. It's much closer. So it certainly is more convenient, I think, for
Yeah, and
for us.
importantly, this is literally downstream, underground from the wells.
Right.
Any potential for a problem wouldn't be something that would be an endangerment to our wells.
And commercial business is good for everybody.
Right.
So, and for the article, it looks like we were Article 27 currently, and the second piece of this was Article 34 right now. It's the last article on the warrant about that amending zoning bylaws and zoning map. Is that the one?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I think the choice there was just that the grouping zoning together at the end seems to be the choice here, but they are related directly to each other.
Yeah.
And you'll see that the planning board voted unanimously in favor of the proposed zoning change.
I think when we get to that point, it makes sense to me to put them together so that it's a more cohesive presentation to town meeting. I understand we usually separate them out, but I think the easier it is to explain, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, whether it's earlier or later, I don't really have a preference.
So again, we don't have to vote on this tonight. We'll be doing this next week about our support for this article. But are there any other questions while we have Val or the Kingston Collection owners here? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. In case we had questions, appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Val.
Yeah, we can, should we definitely change the wording on
For
the
what?
warrant too? For
On that article, the word
Because it says it's a
swap.
lane
swap,
swap,
yeah.
We can fix that. Okay,
All right, so
we'll work on that.
we do not have, Keith is not
That's
here.
okay. Can I ask a question about a different article, since we're still on
Yeah,
article review? There was a request, not to put you on the spot, Chief or Keith, but there was a request on here for establishing a police revolving fund. I don't remember talking about that in a prior meeting. Maybe I'm just forgetting.
I don't know that we have specifically. The police department, I know, I've had conversations with them. I don't know if they've mentioned it or not, but they have some programs that they're starting up. One of them right now, I think, is a boxing program. And what they're looking to do is establish a revolving fund, similar to what the recreation department does, where they are able to keep off budget, so to speak, revenues that they generate from the programs that they're offering and the expenses that those programs will incur, whether they be supplies or equipment or something along those lines. So if it hasn't been suggested to the Board of Selectmen prior to this is partly why I wanted to have this meeting tonight, to flush out this 4, 5, 6 articles that I wanted to try to give the board an opportunity to ask questions and understand better. So that's the purpose of the article. It's funded, I think, at $10,000.
25?
Is it 25?
I think it said 25.
All right, maybe it's 25.
But
I'm
it's
sorry.
not, it doesn't require any funding, right? It's just you
It
can
requires no
spend
funding, it's just so they...
and take in up to that amount.
Yeah, so the last year, the Board of Health started a revolving fund for some of the classes that our health agents offering to cooks in the restaurants in town, or serve safe certifications, things of that nature. This is the exact same situation where the police department is trying to offer some programs that haven't been offered in the past, and rather than try to estimate revenues for those programs and have an appropriation to offset those, they'd like to have a revolving fund that they could authorize, they could spend up to the authorization of $25,000 to supplement and get into the community.
And I think the other benefit, though, is, and Chief, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, maybe you did, and I apologize. I just talked to him yesterday about this. And, but one of the benefits could be that if somebody wants to donate towards National Night Out or the camp or the boxing and whatnot, it can go right into the revolving fund, kind of like we do with other town departments.
Mm-hmm.
So, not that it is a fundraising, whatever element, but it does provide the tool to do that. So if a business wanted to fund National Night Out in some way or to provide scholarships to kids for the camps, then it can go right into that revolving fund.
Everything they said.
Ditto.
I touched on it very, very briefly. I may have in one of the nights I was talking about the boxing program, but, it's about bringing it all under one umbrella and having a neat way or an organized way to account for the funds and just have it all there for community engagement, really.
Okay.
Right. And right now, National Night Out is funded by the Samson Fund and whatnot. So
you know, if you ended up getting donations, then that might be less of a draw from the Sampson Fund, potentially.
I know the Finance Committee has sometimes objected to revolving funds because they want to see, but I think it's still available. We can still run reports and things if people needed to see it. It's public information, so.
Yeah, it's not run through the operating budget, and I certainly don't want to speak for the Finance Committee, but it's something that wouldn't be restricted by the revenues that are generated or the expenses that need to be incurred for a program, like it might be in the general fund. Right now, they'll have the ability to spend up to $25,000 as long as there's money in that revolving fund to support whatever expenditures up to the $25,000 they're looking to expend.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other revolving funds currently, ranging from 10,000 to 700,000. So we definitely used them and seen them.
Yeah, they've been very successful in the Recreation Department. That's probably they're also as successful, frankly, through the Building Department as well. So.
Inspectional services?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't recall speaking about it, so I just wanted to ask since I saw you over there.
All right, so if we go back to the beginning of this memo, the first one is, in the memo anyways, Article 5, the general fund Prop 2.5 override. You have a few items in here, so do you want to discuss them in any particular order?
It's up to the board, really. I shouldn't say I didn't do anything. Kathleen did this for me. You'll have this. You have this in your packets. If I know how to share my screen, I'll be in good shape. This gives the board an idea of where we are financially based on the warrant that you have in front of you tonight. And it's coming up, so I apologize. And it's not very big, so it's tough to see at home, but I wanted to at least try to project it out for people. Right now, in the warrant you have, there's a need for a Proposition 2.5 overlay of $653,000. And what I've tried to do in the memo that I put together for the board to review is provide alternatives to get below the threshold of a Proposition 2.5 override. And really, the two ways, I guess the two ways, the two warrant articles I'm suggesting is not including a Proposition 2.5 override for $575,000 for the police department. And also removing the warrant article to fund an independent school operational out of $100,000. If those two articles are removed from the warrant, you'll have a Proposition 2.5, I'm sorry, you'll have a property tax levy, excess property tax levy of $21,656. Not a lot of money. And I've been reminded more times than I want to admit that there's rounding issues, so it may be a little bit more or a little bit less. But right now, as we sit with if you remove those two articles from the warrant, you would not need a Proposition 2.5 override. So that's a piece of the puzzle that the board's going to make some decisions on. I wanted to try to have this meeting tonight, and I appreciate the board taking the time to do that tonight, is try to work through some of the policy decisions the board has to make on what they want to include and if they want to include articles in what amount. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, how you want to progress through this?
I think if we go just through this memo,
Okay.
I mean, I think, the first one, the Prop 2.5 override, the 575, it already has a no vote at this point. The transfer to employment liability reserve fund, you had suggested reducing it to 100 from 150. I, for one, am in favor of that. I don't know about the rest of the board.
Are we anticipating any retirements?
So I know that in speaking to the fire chief a couple of times, as recently as yesterday.
Not me, by the way.
Yeah, so it's not Marcus. The number would have to be much higher than this. There are, right now, we have $36,000 in our reserve. If we increase it by $100,000, we have about $136,000. The fire chief spoke to his staff, and there are 4 people who are thinking about it. They haven't committed, and they're not sure if they're going to. The cost there, if all 4 were to go, is about $140,000. That would wipe us out. If we had to come back at the fall town meeting we would have a better idea where we are with some of our revenues. We could increase a revenue estimate to offset the increase in the budget to have no tax rate impact in doing it that way.
So-
Again, and in fact, just one last second, I apologize.
No.
So, I think it's important for the board to recognize that cutting it from 150 to 100,000 does nothing for the excess levy capacity. This is coming, this would reduce the amount of money coming out of free cash.
Right, right.
So I know we're talking about 2 different things, and some of the changes that you guys are going to consider and make decisions on, some will affect the surplus, the excess tax levy, others will affect free cash, because free cash is frankly lower than I think anybody wants to see it, but there's some opportunities to, I think, responsibly reduce the amount we're using out of free cash to have that figure be closer to, $750,000 rather than $550,000, for example. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that the $50,000 in this case has nothing to do with excess tax levy.
I'm still in favor of this, because we leave it in free cash. If something changes, we hit it in the fall and you go back to free cash.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, I don't know if anybody disagrees with that, but in general, I think is there anyone who doesn't agree with what I just said? All right. So I think Article 12.
Take it out?
Yeah.
Article 12 is fine, the way he proposed it, I think.
To go down to 100.
Okay.
There was another one wasn't there another one that
Did
would?
Finance Committee already vote that? Do you think they'll have an issue? I
I
know
don't-
that there's only 2 of them here, so
I don't
it's
know
not
if they
really-
voted already, but
Okay.
we have a finance committee meeting tomorrow night where the finance committee is going to
Okay.
vote the remaining articles in the budget, I think is the goal of the finance committee chair.
He's
And so if we have to,
nodding,
if they have to reconsider that from 150 to 100, I think he's open to that.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Thank you.
Wasn't the OPEB one that we were considering?
So, yes, so OPEB, we were proposing to reduce from 100 to $50,000, and I forgot to put this in my
That's okay.
memo. Again, does not affect excess levy capacity,
Right.
it affects free cash. And again, I don't want to speak for anybody in the audience, but I've had conversations with members of the Finance Committee, or a member of the Finance Committee, I guess I should say, and eliminating the transfer completely into OPEB may raise some concerns with financing agencies. Reducing it from $100,000 to $50,000, I think still shows the town has a commitment to making a deposit into the OPEB account, but because of some of the other challenges we're facing, we've just proposed to reduce that number from the $100,000 to $50,000.
And just to be clear, you were not considering the transfer to stabilization fund. We have 100 in there, 100K. We weren't going to modify that, right? Or did you?
Into stabilization, and I apologize, in the back of this memo, the very last page, are some changes that I think the board would want to consider. So what I'm proposing is the transfer from OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, if anybody wants to know what that means. I'm proposing to drop it from 100 to 50.
Yep.
I'm proposing to drop the stabilization transfer from free cash to nothing. So right now, we have, I believe, just over $3 million in our stabilization account. So we're in good shape. It's been years and years since we've touched that. That is like best case scenario. And those are the two reductions I'm suggesting.
So you're
or adjustments. I'm saying eliminate the stabilization fund
Yep.
warrant article.
Okay.
I'm suggesting to cut in half the OPEB
Yep.
warrant article from 100 to 50.
Okay. And then the other one from 150 to 100K for the
employment liability
Yep.
reserve.
Yep.
Yep. Unless Finance Committee has concerns, I'm fine with that. I don't know if anybody else has any concerns. So again, it's the transfer to employment liability reserve fund from 150 to 100. The OPEB, instead of 100K, it's only 50K. And the transfer to stabilization fund of 100K down to nothing, just nothing, no transfer at this time.
What are the ramifications if we do reduce that transfer down to 50?
Which
If
one?
something's needed, the OPEB.
So
From
the money is
100 to
still-
50.
The money is still in free cash.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here, but the money is still in free cash, so if there was some, we would go back in the fall.
OPEB is a
Yeah,
little
so,
bit
I mean, so this
Okay.
money is set aside, it's a 2-point-something million dollar liability right now. It's a liability that the town is responsible for retirees' health insurance. We aren't, the town of Kingston is not, this money is set aside, so in the future, if we need to utilize this money, when some of these post-employment benefits go away, we could utilize that money to help offset that to some degree. I don't think it's going to happen for a long time. But we aren't putting ourselves at risk for needing more than $50,000. It's really just putting money into a savings account designated specifically for post-employment benefits that we wouldn't touch and don't anticipate touching for decades. Fair to say? For a long time?
Not in our lifetime.
Not in my lifetime, which is not decades.
Okay.
Maybe a couple. So we're not putting ourselves, so with the changes we're proposing, there's no, we're not putting the town in any sort of financial risk. We're not making decisions that lenders, if they were to look, would say, oh my gosh, what are these guys doing? Or we're not going to come back in September and say, oh, we got to appropriate another $50,000 for OPEB because it just isn't necessary to do that.
The way I look at it, this is in general, it's kind of like you. When everything's good and honky-dory and your family's going along, you're putting so much in your 401K, so much in savings, so much in there. But when you have a crunch, you're like, okay, we got to hold off on the 401K savings. We got to keep it in reserves. And that's kind of, because we're in a fiscal predicament. I mean, not as bad as some other towns, but certainly next year it's looming. So we just need to be careful.
The way that I understand it, OPEB contributing something is really what we need to be doing.
Yes.
And the employment liability reserve fund, that's the one where it depends on retirements.
Yeah, that's set aside specifically for people who are going to retire. There is no money in departmental budgets to fund any accrued vacation and long-term employees' cases, sick time buyouts or sick time payouts when they do leave. So it's going to be close. We don't know of any others that are going to be significant that we're aware of at this point. But and frankly, I think I speak for the chief. I don't think anybody wants to see 4 firefighters retire in fiscal '26 either. That would be a challenge for those guys to fill long-term firefighters.
All right, so I don't really have any issues with this approach. Again, if Finance Committee comes back and says that they have an issue with any one of these, then, we can certainly look at that and make changes next week, I would think.
So, yeah, happy to, so, the board at some point is going to have to make a decision, and I think my conversation with legal counsel will help. I'm going to get myself off this shared screen because it's awful. Oh my gosh, I'm still there.
Now it's just your face.
Yikes. That'll cut down on viewership. The board's going to have to make some decisions on the leaching field, and I'll talk to legal counsel on what they can do for binding the town for a longer period of time, like the sewer commissioners are asking for.
Yep.
And the other question, I think, frankly, is does the Board of Selectmen support, having the town taxpayers fund 1/3 of the cost of the leaching field? That's a policy decision you guys have to make. But I'll try to get some better information for you on that. The last thing I guess I'd want to just raise, I think overall, the Finance Committee seems to, I think is consistent with the budget that the board has approved with the modifications that we've made, with the exception that at their meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, the Finance Committee voted to increase the library budget and restore the $25,000 that had been cut from the book budget to fund them at their departmental request, I believe, at least for that line item. So at some point between now and closing the warrant next week, unless the Finance Committee decides to reconsider that tomorrow night, I think the board's going to make a decision whether or not you want to support the Finance Committee's decision to do that. And that $25,000 is in this consolidated document, so that $21,000 excess levy capacity considers that additional $25,000, just so you know. Over at least the last 4 years, the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen have been able to present the funding warrant articles in support, both of them in lockstep with each other, both boards supporting those articles. So that would be the only difference between the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen to date.
But I would assume that we can vote the 60 million, whatever the Finance Committee recommended, based on the series of meetings when we vote the articles?
Yep.
Okay.
And the FinCom, I think, is voting tomorrow night, so I can let the board know and have information on your packet for next week that indicates exactly what the FinCom has.
And for the school audit, we've talked about this at several meetings. I struggle with this as well because I think we need to dig in deeper with this, and I know that the school committees are doing as much as they can with the state in trying to adjust funding formulas and things. My understanding is we do have audits done both at the town level and the school level already. I know Whitman Hanson did a separate audit and found some interesting findings. My hope was that we would do an audit prior to having to ask for an override so that we all would have a better understanding of everybody in the town of what is going on there, where the money is going, what it's being spent on, how much is required by law, how much are we choosing to spend, et cetera. I don't know that we have $100,000 to do that.
And it depends on the scope. So, I mean, we've talked about this before. So my feeling is that we need to get Plimpton and Halifax on board and have because we can concentrate on K through 6, and that's probably enough. And we could certainly do that separately. But maybe talk to the other 2 towns and all of the school committees. So there's 4 school committees, each of the 3 towns plus the Silver Lake Regional, to look at overall. And keep in mind, so last year, the year before, they had to realign the region to include the pre-K, and it was a big mess, a lot of shifting cost of special ed from the elementaries to the regional district. It caused a big mess using one-time revenue sources to replace missing circuit breaker and whatnot. Circuit breaker is the money we get back from the state and the feds to at least reimburse partial special ed costs. But keep in mind, too, that the special ed director and the business manager left just as all of that was happening. And then it was a big old mess. And then we got a new special ed director who came in and was saying that, she was going to change things. And she found, a lot of different items that she was going to work on, but now she's put in her resignation. So she's gone. So that's super, super, super concerning for me. And as you know, do you remember which committee I was on forever?
Were you on school committee?
I was on school committees. We have talked about this. And for me, that's concerning because we've lost a lot of institutional knowledge, but also what does that say? Is it such a mess that nobody wants to deal with it and they're going to an easier district? Because ours is not an easy district. It's 4 school committees, 3 towns. It's a lot of work. But my inclination is that we need a special ed audit that does, as you said, it'll go in and take a look at what are we covering, what are we required by law, and what are we doing? So in other words, do we owe child X, 2 speech therapy sessions a week, but we're currently giving them 4? Why is that? And not trying to take things away from people, but we're looking at a huge fiscal cliff next year, and we need to figure out and get control, because special ed spending in this town has skyrocketed since I've lived here. It has just gone, again, we've talked about this before, regular day, we were at the top of the state, and special ed, it wasn't as bad. Now it's reversed. Now we're like one of the best paying special ed towns in the state, so people want to move here, and we're not that high in regular day student spending. So we need to figure out why, and I agree with you. And especially with so much turnover at the top. This is deeply concerning. Like, I don't think she's even finishing her contract. I stand corrected if that's not true, but my understanding is she's leaving before, my understanding.
June 30th, right?
I believe so, and that's before her contract was up.
Well, the good news is, we did, at the Finance Committee, the local school committee chair expressed an interest
Yes.
in having more budget discussions, other than just the springtime March discussion that we've typically had with the schools. So I think that that's at least a step in the right direction.
And I want to point out, I'm not bashing any school committees, because I think everybody's trying to get a hold of this, and they have. Our local elementary school committee has said that they want to start working with us as soon as we're done with town meeting on next year's budget, because we've got a lot of work to do over the next year, not just the schools, the whole town, in preparation for, the fiscal cliff that we're going to see next year.
I think with that said, I don't know if spending $100,000 on this independent audit is the right choice, but I do think digging in will, for all of us, will be a fruitful exercise.
And I think it's, one of the things I think that the board has talked about, and I think the school committee has to some degree as well, is to try to meet maybe on a quarterly basis with the finance committee, the school committee, both local and regional, to talk about, long-term plans and try to come up with some ideas about the potential challenges of an override next year. And I think it's going to be important to have the school committee be on board with this operational audit as well. So it'd be good to collaboratively work together, and we could potentially look for some grants that might help us out funding something like that.
And then we also need to look at some of those new taxes that we discussed in the last meeting about the meals tax, hotel tax, all the other things you can add on. Again, not trying to say that we want to increase everybody's taxes and fees and whatnot, but we also owe it to at least explore it.
Well, and I think we need to revisit that, as we approach next budgeting season, we need to look again at trying to get the transfer station self-funded, looking at the recreation department, and just see if we can get user fees to pay for some of these things that we're paying right now through the budget.
And my curbside pickup just went up 10%, actually more than 10, about 12%. So it's all going up.
And Eric, just a quick question on the special ed. Special education does a state audit. I don't remember how often that happens, and I don't think they dig deep like we're looking at either. But there is a state audit that's done for just specifically special education.
Yeah, and they're really, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of that is that they're looking to make sure that you're doing the least that
At least.
At least.
Yes.
We're looking at.
To the law,
Right.
not necessarily the budget.
And
Yeah.
what we're looking at, what we want to know is, are we doing more than we should be? Again, not trying to take away from kids what they deserve, but if what they deserve is X, and we're doing X, Y, and Z.
I just want to make sure people understand the difference, that's all.
Yeah.
So if we're going to pay X number of dollars more than we are required to, is that what we want to do? And that's fine if that's the choice the town is
Right.
making.
And the problem with this, I can tell you, school committee perspective, is it's all black box, and it's meant that way because of privacy laws, and you're not supposed to know about a person and that
There are
sort of
ways
thing.
to
There are ways, but one of the
anonymize
ways,
that.
and I do know somebody who was a former assistant superintendent for special ed who does audit, so she has done this for other districts. Okay, so again, we don't need to, I don't think we need to make any motion, but, well, no, I guess we do. We do need to move, removing articles.
I don't think you have to. I think if you just want to give me some guidance, I think that's all you need to do. And the question I guess I have, and I hate to keep bringing up the subject, but I don't think I've got a direct decision from the board yet, so I apologize if I did. Article 5. What does the board want? What does the board want to do? Because if there's no interest, if there's no appetite for an override and you want to include Article 5, we've got some budget adjustments to make.
So I think the only way that 5 is going to come back on is if Kim or Tyler want to do that right now.
I mean,
And I still,
I don't have new information, and
No, I know.
I think that I'm settled on, we voted this once with a
Right.
full board.
right. So Tyler will be here next week. I mean, if he has changed his mind, he can say so publicly. But I would say right now, we can remove 5 right
Okay.
now. Unless it's revisited next week.
I think you're
I know
right.
I know there was talks prior, and I don't know if it's still continuing. Are we at least looking at ways to do some of that prior to, I know, because obviously kicking the override, it would be next year.
Right.
At this
Unfortunately,
point.
I don't know if we have any excess
So
levy capacity.
No,
That's-
I agree. I'm
yeah,
I'm
that's-
just wondering if there's still plans to look at it further, see if there's any other avenues.
Go ahead.
So my 2 cents would be this, that if we can find some funding sources or some funding sources come through that we aren't aware of yet, that are pending or possible, that changes the financial condition or financial capability of the town to pay for additional staffing, I think that the chief would help me bring forward a proposal to the board for the fall town meeting, certainly, yeah.
I think the board was generally supportive of that idea. It's just there isn't excess levy capacity at this moment.
We're down to 21,000.
Well, we might, well, no, yeah, those other ones were from free cash, so that doesn't help. Okay, all right, and then 14, we said we were going to get rid of for this year, this transfer to stabilization fund, so we'll
Yep.
get rid of that one.
I think I have the guidance I need from everything
24,
else.
independent school audit, we'll take that one off as well, and then if we could, when you're rearranging,
Yep.
if we could rename 27, whatever the new number is, to not say swap, and then if we could throw.
Yeah, well, right now it says, we're ready.
No time to even sit down.
This is literally like, this is a perfect segue.
Everybody excited to talk about capital now?
Absolutely.
Yes, we just went through the rest of the warrant, so.
All right, well, first I'll say that all the capital projects which the Capital Planning Committee is proposing for annual town meeting are replacements, repairs, or important safety improvements to existing capital assets. There were about $3 million worth of requests this year that will either be funded via grants or not at all. And the Kingston Elementary roof will be a combination of grant and debt funding to the tune of $4 million. Over $2.2 million worth of fiscal year '26 requests will not be funded or could not be funded this time. Many of those projects are important as well, and for most, we'll have to find a way to fund them in the years ahead. On top of existing requests and ones that'll come in last minute. So our job gets tougher and tougher as time moves on. All right, I will just skip ahead to the third motion briefly and say that the Capital Planning Committee is not proposing any new leases for annual town meeting. We are only seeking to make this year's fiscal payments on leases approved at prior town meetings. Then moving to the first motion in the capital warrant article, Project 1, and we voted these unanimously. There was $25,000 to repair or replace folding wall panels at the COA. The panels are sticking on the track, and it's becoming self-locking to the floor, thus damaging the floor. I believe it's scratching tile. The fabric on the panels, which is a surface skin, is sagging and peeling off. It's possible to repair, otherwise we'll need replacement. Other damage is present. The amount contains what could be a substantial contingency. The contractor just won't know until they begin the work. So $25,000 is the base level for a capital project. The work could be, a fraction of that. We just don't know. $51,408 to replace computer servers in 2 buildings this fiscal year. The file servers are being selected for replacement based on the age and warranty of the server. So it's recommended that we start replacing about 2 buildings worth of servers until they're complete every year. This has been a recurring one, $50,000 for various traffic safety improvements. This is an annual investment into engineering one or more improvement projects for roads, drainage, etc. Project 4 is $233,537 to replace 3 patrol vehicles. In most years, the town replaces 2 patrol vehicles. The police chief initially requested 3 Chevy Tahoes, then increased his request to 4 total. He believes that we will need to replace 3 per year for the next several years at least, but with the 4th, we could possibly see the request return to 2 per year. No motion was made by the committee for the 4th vehicle. 2 members voiced their concern, voiced that they would not be voting for it, so with only 4 members, it couldn't move. Project 5, $167,362 to replace police tasers for all 28 sworn officers. That comes with a $28,000 cost increase from when it was presented to us in mid-January when we voted favorably for the project in early March. The tasers are only serviceable for up to 5 years, and the police chief said, and I think it's sensible, that he wants everyone in the department to be trained on the same model unit, which sounds important to me. Project 6, $82,211 to replace the vehicle lift at the highway barn. The current lift is stationary and will not pass inspection next year. The department is looking to replace it with a movable lift that is now commonly chosen for these type of operations. One of the benefits is it'll allow the employees to lift the vehicles outside, so if they're spraying the underside of a vehicle, it'll be safer for them to do so instead of doing that within the highway barn. Project 7, $50,000 to repair or replace the KES C-Wing drain lines. These are drain lines for the restrooms, so they're basically sewer lines. The drain has 1 or more turns that occur on an angle that is not ideal, and over the course of a year or 2, it contributes to sewer backups. They want to jackhammer it up and make some replacements. That also may be estimated to be higher than the work will ultimately be, but they don't know until they begin. Project 8, $50,000 to repair the Kingston Intermediate School parking lot, driveways, sidewalks, and other asphalt surfaces. This work was identified and prioritized by the building envelope study or facility assessment that was done in 2024. Some of this damage is a hazard to the kids and employees and people coming and going that could cause tripping hazards and so forth.
Hey, quick question.
Yep.
That last one, is that a recent quote? 50,000, it just seems low to me.
So last year, they had this building envelope study,
Yeah.
which did everything except the roofs of the 2 buildings, and it did the grounds as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the architectural firm that did that gave them sort of upper and lower estimates for work.
Okay,
So I couldn't tell you if they got a more recent one, but that was done last year.
okay, okay.
Okay, we have a second motion. This is a bit different. The town planner is working with the highway department. They used planning department funds of about $75,000 to do a townwide assessment of intersections, trails, sidewalks, and so forth, and have assessed complaints. In addition, have assessed complaints which were sent to the selectmen regarding the roads. These are the ones I'm going to be describing to you are top 5 level projects in terms of pedestrian and bicyclist safety. And the reason we put these under a separate motion is that we need to fund engineering that will make it so we are able to get the grant, because the grant will cover construction, but we have to do the studies and design. We don't know yet if we're going to receive one or all of these grants, so because that is likely to change before town meeting, I thought it'd be simpler for the purposes of doing math on town meeting floor, and if there's any town meeting discussion, to have them under a separate motion. Project 9, $151,000 for a Green Street crosswalk realignment. The cost is for engineering, being done by Apex, which was formerly Environmental Partners. It's needed to attain the grant, includes contingencies. The goal is to create safer pedestrian crossing and sidewalk. This is in front of the library. The Safe Streets Grant Program is the one they're targeting. And the work will probably ultimately be $101,000. Project 10, $160,000 for engineering of the Pembroke Street at Grove Street bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Cost is for engineering needed to attain the grant and also includes contingencies. The goal is to create, again, safer pedestrian crossing and sidewalk. It's also a Safe Streets Grant Program. And Project 11 is $49,550 for the Main Street pedestrian safety and traffic calming from Pembroke Street to Summer Street. This is, I believe, the top priority of all the projects. It's $49,000 for a preliminary design with follow-up engineering afterwards, and the total project will probably wind up being $3.8 million. So these are, of course, like I said, we may get all of them. That's probably not very likely, though. We could get none of them. So they're just applying to see what they can, what we can do with this year. And based on the priority levels, I assume that they'll be applying for these in the years to come if we don't receive the grant awards.
Can I ask you a quick question? So Project 10, bicycle, and I realize you're not the department overseeing this, but the bicycle and pedestrian improvements, is that creating new bicycle paths?
I don't believe it's creating a path there. Some of these projects involve having flashing beacons to alert traffic as to the potential for crossing. Some of them might change the curbs a bit.
Okay.
So, for instance, the entrance at the library on Green Street is being altered a little bit. It won't do anything in the parking lot, but it will enhance, I think, the car's ability to see people approaching. Yeah. It'll direct them in a way. They are going to change that. If you go to that intersection from Grove onto Pembroke, I think they're creating more of a perpendicular intersection, yeah. So maybe they can't turn quite as fast and potentially hit somebody who's crossing.
Right,
that's my interpretation, having looked at the design.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because if we're getting a grant to build bicycle paths, that's great, but then maintaining that stuff that's a big cost down the road. That's what I was, the point of my question. All right. Any other questions so far?
I have a couple of questions, but they might not be for Heath. They might be for the departments themselves.
Yeah.
On the tasers, I know the other day we talked about having 26 sworn officers, but there's 28 tasers. Is that a backup? Because they're what, like $6,000 each-ish for all the.
I'll try to answer beforehand,
and
I'm probably completely wrong about his intentions, but he explained to us that every day at the start of a shift, they test their taser. So if a taser doesn't work, I imagine you need some spares.
Right, and anticipated growth. If there is growth.
And anticipated growth.
And they would all have to be.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure, because I saw 28. I know we talked about 26, so I just wanted to make sure that I had the numbers right. That's
the
fine.
model changes every year, I believe. So if you bring in new people and you have already given these tasers out to all the existing officers.
Every 5 years.
No, I thought that's when you had to replace them, every 5 years. Are they not issuing a new model? So potentially you could hire somebody who you wouldn't be able to acquire the prior model that everybody else is trained on, right? No? Okay.
The firmware changes quarterly, sometimes, but that's the software that goes in it.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just a high-level question on the tasers, actually. Is that something that should potentially be put into like a maintenance mode where we're doing 10 every couple of years or whatever it is, or?
That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
I
was just wondering.
Write it down.
Okay.
It's a long-term capital plan too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question is for the replacement of the vehicle lift. Will the fire apparatus be able to be serviced should the mechanic have the right
I don't
certifications
believe
to
the
do
tower, I
that?
believe we discussed that, and the tower ladder might be too big.
Well,
Is that
okay,
correct?
that's.
It will?
It will work? Okay, I'll work for the tower ladder. Okay, great. 2 more questions. The school department's paving parking lot, I noticed that you mentioned that it was KIS. It doesn't specify that. Is the thinking that if they can do more than just KIS, maybe they would do
I thought it
things
was,
at
I
KES
thought it
as
was
well?
KIS.
It could be. Sometimes I know with the schools being so close together and being on the
I
same
thought that might have been
campus,
from the meeting.
sometimes it's a little, they do that where it's a little more flexible in case for whatever reason they're able to do something more than just
I
KIS.
may have misspoke. I thought that they were citing the building study, the cracks and so forth that you see at KES are more recent.
Okay. I was just thinking it was a good way of
It's
solving
one
a
campus.
potentially problem. It's one campus, and if they don't specify KIS, then they have a little more flexibility.
Yeah, so if they said that the ones at KES were more important, I mean, you see where they've spray painted
Sure.
them, so they're more visible to pedestrians.
Last question. This is more of a funding question, so this might be a Keith or Kathleen question. I see that we're going to be using, it looks like, a little over $1 million from the Capital Stabilization Fund, but I see in an earlier article that we only have $864,000 plus the 100 that we're transferring in. It doesn't add up to enough money, so
So
are we just expecting more payments from meals tax?
We get meals tax every quarter.
Okay.
But and I think it's important to, when we move forward, we have no money. You know, let me back up. Our capital stabilization fund is almost completely expended in a projection moving forward. So we've got a, you know, we knew there were issues over the past few years trying to get caught up on getting our equipment back up to par. I think that's been done. So for the next 2 or 3 years, you know, incurring more debt and using capital stabilization as a tool to levy that, to fund a lease, for example, is not something that we can afford to do. After that, and I know the FinCom chair has been championing this, and I don't disagree. I completely agree with him. You know, we would like to use this capital stabilization for the intent I think it was established, which is to pay cash as much as we can for capital items rather than using it for leasing. So after fiscal 27 or I think it's 28, that the dependency on that capital stabilization for existing leases drops, and we should be making a concerted effort to set aside as much money as we can in that, so we don't have to lease anything. We can pay cash for most of the capital we're having to buy.
Thank you. That was all I have.
Any other questions?
No.
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Am I missing anything else? I think the only thing we have left is to close the warrant. We're not. That's fine. All right.
Do we act?
No minutes?
No, and
Parliamentary report?
we don't need a report. Anything else, Keith? No. Any comments?
See you next week.
See you next
Do we
week.
not need to,
He said we
we can do it
gave
next
him
week?
direct- we said
Okay.
we gave him
Oh, yeah,
direction,
okay,
so-
okay. Sorry.
Yep, so our next regular meeting is a week from night, same time, same location. With that, I would,
To adjourn?
yep, have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous.